The sports realm is absolutely buzzing, and the NHL is no exception, and that's why you're tapped into your daily source for fantasy hockey news and NHL betting breakdowns, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Wednesday episode, we're taking a look into the top injury updates to Jack Hughes, Connor McDavid, while also looking at these young guns on the rise. Let's tap in.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. The Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast is bringing you everything that you need to know. We're talking about Connor McDavid, Jack Hughes, all the young guns on the rise, getting a look at this time of the NHL season. Shout out to all the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. It is the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Steele, you know we're coming with these updates. When Jack Hughes gets shut down for the season, we're talking about it. Connor McDavid, day-to-day. Connor McDavid breaks a nail. We're talking about it. So we're bringing those updates. You know, we try to bring these 30-minute episodes so everyone out there gets exactly what they need to know about fantasy, betting, and all the NHL news they need Monday through Friday. Make sure you drop us that 5-star review. Smash the subscribe button on YouTube. We're also going to talk about some young guns getting a look. Because look, Steele, it's not all roses and rainbows for all these teams out there. Some of these NHL franchises have to utilize this stretch of the season, even though they're out of it, to see what they got with some of these young pieces. Jesper Wallstedt, Wright, Olen Zellwegger. We're going to talk about it. These pieces all might be very fantasy relevant in the near future. Wednesday's bets. Right over to you, my friend, because, look, Jack Hughes has been a very hot topic on this podcast.
Yes, he
and when
has.
it comes to fantasy drafts, and, you know, you've used the comparison about JT Miller, but the comparison, I think, holds true for a lot of situations. If a player has a very serious track record, and I'm not just saying, oh, an ankle here or a knee there, a very serious track record of injuries throughout his career, regardless of how high his ceiling is, I think there's something to be said about considering that when you talk about value in the fantasy realm.
Yeah, it is very true. And I'll get to Jack Hughes in a little bit, but Connor McDavid missing some time, obviously.
Whoa!
Saving
Jack Hughes.
I'll save Jack Hughes for a little bit, but let's talk about Connor McDavid. You know, like he's day to day right. Hey, he's day to day right now against. He's going to miss that game against the Vegas Golden Knights on Wednesday. I think that would be a game to actually keep him out of, anyways, against a very physical and hard team to play against. And then I really just care about Connor McDavid being healthy. So if he is injured, yeah, it's a good game to miss against the Vegas Golden Knights. But I also care about Connor McDavid getting to 100 assists. He's got 5 games left after missing the Vegas one to get to 100. So I would assume that he could very easily get to 100 with games against the Arizona Coyotes twice, Vancouver Canucks, San Jose Sharks, and Colorado Avalanche. So that's what I care about first. But yeah, well, let's get over to Jack Hughes if you don't mind.
Well, hold on. All I got to say is holding Connor McDavid out at any point is a bold strategy. I appreciate what you're saying, but I also just want to say this, because head coach Chris Knobloch on Tuesday said they're going to find out the severity today, Wednesday, while we're talking about this. So it's like, what is going on here? Because you know they're going to be very tight-lipped and very careful. So let's go over to this Jack Hughes conversation. I just needed to throw that out there because anything happens to Connor McDavid, regardless of where Edmonton is in the standings, which obviously that's important this year too. He's that good. He's that fantasy relevant. Right over to you, my friend. Jack Hughes, shoulder surgery, shut down. This has been a mess of a season for the New Jersey Devils from the jump. He's been hurt a couple times this season. They've had multiple injuries to key pieces. And now it's saying he should be ready. It looks like he'll be ready for training camp. This is another very serious injury to a very young player, Steele.
Yeah, for me, it's nothing new. It's expected at this point for Jack Hughes to get injured, and he has been injured this season. He's missed already 20 games, and he's going to miss the remainder of the regular season. And And again, the hot topic between Jack Hughes on this podcast seems to be very, very, very hot, especially when we talk about JT Miller in the mix as well. But again, this is expected from Jack Hughes from me. And it's nothing. I'm not trying to, jab at him and take a shot at him whatsoever. He's a very talented player, a guy who put up 74 points in 62 games.
We're not doing that. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah, it's not what we're doing. But when you look at his entirety as a fantasy player, a guy who ranks 246 in the faceoff circle at 37.2% win rate, doesn't hit, doesn't block, has more giveaways than takeaways. He's a minus 12. He has 6 or 10 penalty minutes, so he doesn't do anything there. He does 3 things really well in fantasy leagues. He shoots the puck a lot. He produces big on the power play, and he scores a lot of points. But by no means, we just had our episode about top goal scorers in the league. Right. He's not a top goal scorer in this league. He had a breakout season where last year we had 43 goals in the season, but he can't be a top goal scorer in the league if he's not healthy. He doesn't play enough games to get up in that same echelon, that same tier as the guys we spoke on yesterday's episode.
I don't think it's fair to call him a top goal scorer in the league.
No, he's a point producer.
I'm with
that's
you there.
What he does when he's healthy. He's a playmaker. He passes the puck. He's a juggernaut on the power play, but he does those 3 things very well. I think he can't seem to do well is stay healthy, and half the time it's not even his fault. You can't like our friend Blake said, you can't predict injuries.
Shout out to Blake.
You can't predict injuries, but when a guy gets injured this often at this stage in his career, it's something to take note of, because we've done the same thing with Josh Norris, who has missed times now. And I'm not putting him in the same tier as Jack Hughes, but he's missed a lot of games to shoulder surgery. Jamie Drysdale, young defenseman we've talked about, he's missed a lot of games. Trevor Zegras now. I mean, these are guys you got to take a look at, and those are factors you got to take into consideration. And as good as Jack Hughes is, the health concerns are a huge problem for me. And that's why, again, going back to the conversation with Blake and you that we had a while ago, or, a few times on this podcast, that's why I have JT Miller ranked higher. He fills out the peripherals like an absolute god. He scores, he hits, he gets penalty minutes. He's a plus player. And he doesn't get injured. He's a very durable guy, and that's why I have JT Miller ranked higher than Jack Hughes. And even at this point with Jack Hughes, again, he's a second round guy because he gets injured so often.
I think just talent-wise, I think that's where we were at before. It's very clear in offensive,
I wasn't out there. I was telling you. I was telling everybody out there.
Hey, pal. No, look, we don't need to go back down that rabbit hole. I just needed to bring it up because it's a real thing when you also look at his ability as a 100-point player, which he did a season ago. That's the kind of expectations we have to raise the bar to.
99 points.
Okay, here we go. But you know what I'm saying? Because also just talent-wise, it's clear. But at the end of the day, we're just bringing updates. You guys need to know what's going on out there. Jack Hughes going out at this time of the year. Hey, even though the New Jersey Devils have been a mess, these are key pieces that are key cogs for your team. If you have Connor McDavid out for even one game and you have a couple of days left in your fantasy season, I know a lot of seasons are over, but there are a couple that are still going. That's critical. The episode's still going. We're going to talk about young guns right around the break because this time of year, Steele, fantasy GMs can't be slacking in the mackin'. They got to be taking a look at all possible angles to get a leg up on next year. You know I love talking about that keeper dynasty side of things. That's why we're going to break down some young players after the break, Wednesday's bets. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Don't spend hours on multiple job sites looking for candidates with the right skills when you can do it all with Indeed. Find top talent fast with Indeed's suite of powerful hiring tools like matching, assessments, and virtual interviews. Make sure you check out Indeed. Indeed knows when you're growing your own business, you have to make every dollar count. That's why with Indeed, you only pay for qualified applications that match your must-have job requirements. Here we go, Steele. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application. Pricing not available for everyone. You need to hire. You need Indeed.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much again. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us in the comments, on the channel, on all the podcast platforms. So thank you so much for all our listeners out there who tune in on a weekly basis. We've got some pretty good content on today's episode. We just got finished up talking about Jack Hughes. I'm still a little heated about it. You know how I get in that conversation.
Look, Jack Hughes is sick. He's nasty. He's got all kinds of offensive ceiling.
Yes.
He's a better than a point per game player on his game. We're not trying to take away from Jack Hughes.
We don't, yeah.
It's just when you get hurt this often and you're going to be relied on in the top 2 rounds of the fantasy draft, and then you're missed. Big. This just has to be mentioned. Do you factor it in when you draft players? I don't like when people say you don't factor in injuries. That's just me, Steele. You have to. Do you base it all on injuries? No. But why would you not consider it, especially – look, we don't need to go down. We're going to have all offseason to talk about this. The New Jersey Devils are ghost. A lot of these teams – well, all of these teams we're going to talk about with these young players are also done. But they are using this time to perhaps look at these young pieces that they have and see what they're made of. And this means big-time options for fantasy GMs out there. And look, Jesper Wallstedt comes right in. We're going to start with him in the Minnesota Wild. Obviously, Philip Gustafsson's under contract for the next 2 seasons. He is going to be the guy. What happens with Marc-Andre Fleury, we don't know. Jesper Wallstedt is I believe, 2nd-round draft pick. Steele, I have it right here. First round, 20th overall.
20th overall.
This kid at 21, he's already proven he can play with men in the SHL in Sweden. He comes in, he gets a shutout. I know it's the Blackhawks. But these are those trenches you have to dig into, Steele, that if you do have like one of those minor eligible slots on your keeper dynasty team, you should be going out and having a look at some of these players. And Jesper Wallstedt has just proven, even though it is the Blackhawks, that he can play at the NHL level. And you know me, when it comes to goaltenders, you got to be eyes double peeled on all of these options.
Yeah, you definitely have to. And we've talked about a few of them. I know, again, we talked about your trade earlier in the year going after Wall. So, we've talked about, even Lucas Dostal, again, for the Anaheim Ducks. We're going to touch on an Anaheim Ducks prospect as well.
Yes, we are.
Jesper Wallstedt is the guy after the guy right now in Philip Gustafsson. And, it's up in the air.
That's part of the problem.
Happen. That is part of the problem.
Yeah.
And we don't know, again, also part of the problem, we don't know what Marc-Andre Fleury is going to do with the future of his career. And if he wants to come back to Minnesota, maybe he wants to go play somewhere else, or maybe he retires in fully. So it's up for question marks, but Jesper Wallstedt has proven, like you said, he can play amongst men. He's had a decent record and decent, showcasing with the Iowa Wild and the AHL over the last couple of seasons.
Up and down,
the stats have been, very similar. A .908 save percentage back-to-back years, a 2.68 with a 2.76 goals against average. So very similar stats with, somewhat similar record as well. So again, he's only played 2 times in the NHL. Just, one was an absolute domination from the Dallas Stars where the Wild just played absolutely embarrassing in front of him. Right. And then he gets a shutout against the Chicago Blackhawks. So that's a little bit of both worlds of what can happen in the NHL for a young prospect goalie right now.
Most definitely. And the main vein of this conversation is just don't miss opportunities to take a look at these players. Because look, I even mentioned Shane Wright on last week's episode. And because he steps right into the NHL, he scores a goal. And then look, he has 3 points. I know it's Anaheim, but the other night he has a 3-point night. It's looking like they're probably going to send him back down to the Coachella Firebirds of the AHL. Coachella is going to be on a deep Calder Cup run, something they did last year. He performed last year in the Calder Cup playoffs. He's had a great year at the AHL level this year. Shane Wright was one of those players. This happens at all drafts in professional sports, Steele. Someone is pumped, headed in. Some things happened ahead of the draft. There was talks about him maybe being a bad seed. His personality was off, and he dropped. Look, he doesn't do a ton of things over the top sensationally well, but he does everything on the ice well. And when you can do, I know that was a bit of a boring breakdown, but you know what I'm saying? It's not like he's elite at a ton of different things.
Still
he's
very young right
solid. Now. He's solid. And I think he is a perfect kind of second line, maybe third line center in the NHL. Does that mean he doesn't have a bright future? I don't know what it means. I just think right now, showing that he can still get it done offensively. And when you look in Seattle, I think they've already said he's basically guaranteed a roster spot next year. And up the middle, they don't have any depth. Why can't he be the second line center? And then you're going to be upset if you didn't take a look at him now as a second line center in the NHL that you can jump on right now when no one's looking at him.
Yeah, shout out to Cole with the fire comment on the YouTube channel, letting us know the inside information, everything as a Seattle Kraken fan out there. So shout out to Cole for that fire comment.
Bang.
He's practically, like you said,
a lock.
Yeah, shout out to everyone in the comments. But like Cole said, and like you just said right now, practically a lock for the roster for next season. They, the Seattle Kraken traded Alexander Wenberg to the Rangers. They opened up a spot in that second line center position, or just the center position, and they filled that spot with Shane Wright. So he's practically guaranteed a spot, but it's good. It's good to see a decent look for Shane Wright before the season ends. 6 games, 4 points, 10 shots, 5 blocks, 49% in the faceoff circle. So it's good to get a little bit of a glimpse, but like you said, he's been really good with the Coachella Valley Firebirds, 43 points in 55 games and heading into the playoffs in the AHL. So love to see that from Shane Wright. Going to have to keep your eye on him for next year as well, and going into training camp for the Seattle Kraken. Over to one of your prospects you really like talking about, and Olen Zellwegger of the Anaheim Ducks. I want to get your opinion, your breakdown of this player, along with what the future holds for him as well as this Anaheim Ducks team, because I have a pretty good statement I got to get off the chest, but I want to hear your take on this first.
His skating ability is sensational. That's what kind of jumped off the page for me when I watch Olen Zellwegger. I'm not going to sit here and say I know Anaheim Ducks prospects back and forth, and I watch Anaheim Ducks hockey, but I've read into Olen Zellwegger because when other guys out there who spend much more time watching these guys than I do mention him at length, he's a good puck carrier. He's not afraid to block shots, even though he's like 5'9", maybe on a good day 5'10". He has all the tools to be a very good kind of number one quarterback for a power play. Maybe he's the 1B or 2A option. I'm not saying he's a number one D-man, Steele. It might be a stretch to also call him a number 2, but he is like a 2B or a third. And in the NHL, if you have offensive ability and the quality to carry a power play, that means you're very much fantasy relevant. So that's why I got to pay attention to Olen Zellwegger. And look, the Ducks are a mess. But what they can do when some of these kids roll is score goals. And if you're looking into offensive young D-men, Olen Zellwegger has got to be right at the top of the list in terms of prospects on the rise. And speaking of opportunity, he's going to be an everyday NHLer next year, most definitely, because of the holes in that Anaheim Ducks roster. He's a second-round draft pick. He's played in North America, and he can bring it. Actually, he's played a ton. He's Canadian. Olen Zellwegger might actually sound like he's something else. He's from Calgary, Alberta, and he can bring it.
37 points in 44 games this year in the AHL. He's performed at the WHL at the World Juniors as well. And from the small sample size we've seen this year, I am quite happy with what he's done as a fantasy defenseman. 7 points in 22 games, 29 shots, 29 blocks, 14 hits. Seems to fill out those peripherals.
He likes to block shots, which is strange for a small guy.
But that's great for a defenseman and great as a goaltender if you're going to get in front of the puck for him.
Coaches love it.
I mean, hey, you got to love that, especially as a fantasy GM, if that's a category of yours. The problem I have with this team is, and we've talked about it, is to me, they're too young and they're very inexperienced. And even with the guys that they brought in, and Alex Kalor, Ratko Gudas, those aren't the guys that are really going to shape them into form, really. They are a great veteran presence, but not the type of guys you need right now to kind of mentor them on their games as a skilled player. And I believe, like we've said, they have some really good players on their team, but they don't really have a superstar. And
they don't have an identity either, which is
they don't. And I really believe that as fantasy GMs and fantasy, enthusiasts, we've put a lot of faith in McTavish and Carlson and Terry and Zegras and Dostal and others. And while they're all good players, they're just not good enough right now. And just looking at, that as a whole, I don't know. I truly don't think, or I truly believe that's going to affect Zellweger's fantasy value dramatically next year. Because again, I was just looking at the numbers. When your best player unexpectedly is a 30-year-old Frank Vatrano with 55 points, which is a career high for him. And he's their highest rostered fantasy player by 40% on ESPN and 35%. They don't have another player over 45% on either of those platforms. And I just don't know how high or if he's a draftable player because of that. He's definitely going to be a player you pick up on the regular. He's definitely one of those guys, but is he a draftable player towards the later stages of the fantasy draft?
It's a very good question, and I would have to say for the most part, no. And it would have to be those deep keeper dynasty leagues where you almost have to take risks
that's what I was
on
thinking
players
too.
on the rise. But in most formats, no, he's not draftable. And the only way that you kind of even would look to him is the Ducks have a hot start like they did this year. He has a hot start, and he would have to be until he's 20 years old. You know, he's played 22 games in the NHL. This is the thing with all of these players. We're just highlighting options that if you can get lucky with one of these because you have had your eyes on them, at some point, one of those three guys that we just mentioned very soon is going to be effective at the NHL level. Yeah. All three of those teams, though, are kind of, especially the Ducks, are going to be in Struggle Town, USA and Canada. So we also have to factor that in. However, there is never an opportunity or a moment that you need to slack on. That's why you need to have a look at all of these names at all portions of the NHL season. We got Wednesday's bets coming up right around the break. Steele, why don't you take us there?
Wednesday's bets also after the break. I'm going to throw a couple of other prospects Flip's way, and he's going to mention which one he's looking forward to most next year, along with the other guys we just talked about. But first, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. That's why we use the Game Time app always. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. Going to a Toronto Blue Jays game has never been easier. The Blue Jays are actually playing the Yankees later in this week, and you can find tickets as low as $8 with killer last-minute flash deals, zone deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guaranteed. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. They are obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. And Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats with the best deals. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Flip, before we get over to big time bets, I just quickly want to continue the conversation of some other prospects that have played a little bit this year.
Okay.
I want to throw them your direction because, we've talked about Logan Stanko, and that could have been another guy we talked about because he's only played 22 games. But we've sort of dug into that already a lot this year. And Josh Doan recently for Arizona. But I'm going to throw a couple of names out there, and I want to get your top guy other than the guys we've already talked about. So I've got 6 people on this list.
Whoa.
Devin Levi, Dustin Wolf, Connor Zary, Shane Pinto, Adam Fantilli, just because we only got to see half of him last year or this year. And this last guy who hasn't played in the NHL yet, first round pick for the San Jose Sharks, and Quentin Musty, because he has been absolutely killing it with the Sudbury Wolves in the OHL.
Musty is very intriguing. And look, we just mentioned at length about opportunities for young players.
Yeah.
The San Jose Sharks are the worst team in the NHL. If any team, Blackhawks are there too. They're going to get some looks at these very, very young players. But I would have to say, Steele, I don't know if it's a cop-out. Dustin Wolf is intriguing, but we've talked a lot about him. Adam Fantilli's game, I liked how he played with some edge. I like what's going on in Columbus in terms of some of these young forwards. We know that the back end is very much, and the whole team is a work in progress. But I'm going to say Adam Fantilli, and that might be easy because he's the 2nd overall draft pick. Or was he 3rd? I don't even remember now because it feels like 2 decades ago.
I believe he was 2nd. No, he was 3rd because Carlson was
3rd. Leo Carlson? Yeah.
Anyway. Carlson went 2nd.
Fantilli would be it. There's a lot of young, talented offensive Russians that he might balance out nicely with.
Yeah.
They might start to score a ton of goals. I don't know about the rest of the team, but it would have to be Adam Fantilli, although you brought up a whole bunch of names, and it all goes together with just know what's going on, know what these teams are up to, know where these players are headed, and you will do a whole lot better in terms of recouping from a bad season, because not everybody can win every single time. But shout out to everybody on Twitter this week. Shout out to everybody in the DMs dropping comments, showing us where you finished. We got championships. We got runners up. We got money in people's pockets. And that's where we're headed right now. Steele bets. Where are you looking tonight, my friend? Wednesday. I think there's only, what are we looking at? 3-game board?
Three games on the schedule. I'm looking at the last game of the night, the Vancouver Canucks and Arizona Coyotes.
Me too.
I've got a same game parlay.
Same game parlay?
Same game parlay. Okay, let's absolutely kill it with this one. I don't know. I will probably have at least one of the same, or maybe similar, but I've got 3 player props for my same game parlay. I'm going a little, I don't think I've done this before.
Go off.
Haven't done this on the podcast, but first pick of the night. JT Miller over 1.5 points in this matchup.
Considering today's conversation, Steele, you almost have to.
I almost had to, especially. I absolutely love that. He had a 3-point night the other game. I forget who they played against. Might have been the Vegas Golden Knights, actually.
It was the Vegas Golden Knights.
So 3 assists for JT Miller. He's on an 8 or 9 game point streak right now. JT Miller over 1.5 points against the Coyotes.
Okay.
Second pick, Quinn Hughes, anytime assist. He's absolutely been killing it with the Apples this year as well. He's almost a lock for the Norris Trophy at this point. That's the second player prop. And last but not least, Elias Pettersson, anytime assist for my third and final pick of the night. That's actually going to be my lock of the night as well. He's on a 3 or 4 game point streak with a couple of apples in each of those games as well. So I'm in heavy favor of the Vancouver Canucks, and I'm hitting those player props.
First and foremost, the Arizona Coyotes have been playing very decent hockey over the last 3 games, including a 2-1 tight game against the Vancouver Canucks on April 3rd that they could have won. So I wanted to just come in here and say, before I started talking about puck lines and this and that and all kinds of craziness, the Vancouver Canucks struggled against Arizona Coyotes only about a week ago. So that's number 1. So I'm going to go Vancouver on the money line because this is the same game parlay as well. Both teams have been involved with a ton of crooked number games over the last couple. So I'm going over. So you got Arizona feeling it. You got Vancouver feeling it. Over 6.5. That's the second one. And it parlays with my lock of the night, Quinn Hughes, anytime assist. It's been a while since I felt the same game parlay as aggressively as I am right now, Steele.
Yeah.
It might be hammer time, and that might just be a nice little bump for us as we head into Masters season, baby. Past the Georgia Pines to Augusta National. You and I are golf fanatics as well. It's going to be a big week for sports, and it's going to be a big week for Quinn Hughes, lock of the night, anytime assist along with you.
Scotty Scheffler, Tiger Woods, Xander Schauffele, and there's
Xander, baby.
There's a lot of big names going into Augusta this week, but those are the locks of the night. Those are the picks for Wednesday night. Lock of the night, Quinn Hughes, anytime assist from Flip. Elias Pettersson, anytime assist for myself. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Day, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. You can also find them on the Amazon Fire Free TV channel app. So make sure you go subscribe. Go check them out over there. Wonderful things happening on the channel. And thank you once again for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your bets. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.